Meeting of the Finance Committee for Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. A couple quick announcements. Same announcements I make every other time. If you can silence your phone, that'd be great. There should be a switch on the side, hopefully. So if you could please silence your phone. And also, this meeting may be shown live on the local broadcast channel SMAC and recorded for future viewing entertainment. And with that, I'm looking for a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing. Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is open. We will be covering the special town meeting warrant Article 1.
Okay, I just have a public service announcement for you.
Sure, Dave. You have a public service announcement?
Yeah, if anybody in the room needs a copy of the material that was sent out, we have authorization to be able to print something for you. So there was a recent email that went out, so just raise your hand or let me know and I'll go make some copies.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dave. And there are a couple copies up on that table there, depending on the document you're looking for. All right, public hearing is open. Do we have a presenter for Article 1, the elementary school building project?
Excuse me. I blame Peter Banis, who gave me a lifesaver.
Doesn't sound like it's saving your life.
I tried the best I could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to your committee, my name is TJ Recupero. I am on the school building committee. To my left is Dr. Baeta, of course you know. With us here tonight is Carl Franceschi of DRA, the project designer, also Eric Rubin of Vertex, the OPM. Several members of the committee are here. I didn't look around too extensively, but I think I saw Joe Buckley. Of course, Diane Dolan is on the building committee as your representative from the finance committee. This is and I apologize to any members of the building committee and project team who I've missed. This is, of course, a repeat of the article that came before you and town meeting last spring for the appropriation for an elementary school off Park Street. The school would have a maximum capacity of approximately 600 students. I think you've heard all the details. Carl Franceschi is here, of course, to answer any questions you may have. I did put some basic floor plans and renderings in the materials that I submitted in case anybody has any particular questions. But I think this matter has been hacked over, both in the community at large and before various committees and groups, where the details of the project are pretty well known. Certainly welcome any questions, and I should say here that we have a public forum on January 21st at 7 p.m. at the high school for anybody who wishes to show up and ask any questions of the building committee and its project team. Having said that, this is an appropriation for the school building, requesting an appropriation in the amount of, and it's important that you look at the motion and not the article. I don't have the motion in front of me, but if you take that article and deduct the motion is there. To request an appropriation of $113,157,888 for the construction of the school. A couple notes on this amount. First of all, it is the 112 million is, that subtracts out the $1 million that was already appropriated by town meeting for feasibility study. You'll notice that in the article, the entire project cost is referenced as 113,157,888. In the motion, that's subtracted out. Also, the building committee has, as a gesture of good faith to the community, and of course this committee, has done some adjustment to the project costs and the appropriation request and reduced it by 1.25 million, and I'll explain that. So as a condition of extending the town's deadline for securing local funding until the April election, MSBA said that we could not change the project scope. So we looked at it, and one of the ways that we could reduce the cost in some way without touching project scope was to propose a change in the method of delivery from, we've discussed this at length, construction management at risk to traditional design bid build, where we build out project components. And so that accounts for the construction manager's fee that we'd have to pay. We accounted for what would be some cost escalation, since the original amount was proposed in March and the project was designed and priced out back last March when it came before town meeting the first time. So we left a safe amount in for what we think is cost escalation. We reduced it by what we think we can absorb through a change in the method of delivery, and came up with the 112,157,888. And not without quite a bit of discussion and thought. But I will note also, if you look in the materials that we submitted, there is about $5.5 million. I can't do the math that quickly, but it's 4.6, I believe, and 800 and some odd thousand dollars worth of contingency money that is in the appropriation in case there are adjustments that need to be made for cost escalation, change orders, and otherwise throughout the course of the project. So we think that the cost is safe at 112 and change, as I explained. The other change in the article from last spring is that we included the South School parcel. You might see, actually, in the draft I submitted, it was highlighted, and this one it isn't. If you look in the about 8 lines into the motion, and I believe it's also in the article, you'll see a reference to tax parcel number 076-021-0. That is the 7.5 approximately acre parcel on which the South School now sits. The reason for doing that was that putting that within the scope of the article, well, it doesn't become part of the project. It allows the appropriation to be used if there's any contingency funds at the end of construction. It allows the town to use any leftover contingency funds for demolition primarily, if that's the policy that the select board or whichever policy board decides. But it affords the town a source of funding to manage that property, however, and dispose of it however the policymakers see fit. Those are the only changes to the article. Outside of that, the language is all submitted to and approved by MSBA. It's identical to the language that was submitted in all other respects that was submitted last spring. It's actually identical in all other respects with the exception of cost and identification of the project as the article that was voted on for the high school. It's pretty standard language that's prescribed by MSBA. So we're here before you, of course, requesting for a new vote for an appropriation, because an appropriation that's coupled with a debt exclusion, if the debt exclusion, once the debt exclusion vote is taken, you have window. I think it's 120 days, don't quote me on that, but it's a narrow window of time after which the appropriation vote expires. So we had to come before you, since we have an extension of time for approval through MSBA, we had to come before town meeting again for a second appropriation vote. And that's why we're here tonight. And at that, I'd like to pass off to Dr. Baeta.
Good evening, all. Joe Baeta, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to TJ's comments, and on behalf of the entire building committee, I think that the facts remain pretty much the same, with the differences that were just announced by TJ that the building committee has been working on. This is a opportunity of what I call the perfect storm, and I think some of you have heard me say this phrase before. A perfect storm whereby the need of the district has been clearly identified through a process, an increase in enrollment, and what I believe is fiscal responsibility long-term, which is to build a new school and take two schools offline, and that would be the South School and the Jones School. The second part is the redistricting committee will have its second meeting tomorrow, of which we continue to look at the idea that we are redistricting regardless of the April vote for a new building, which would be pushed out because we'd have more time, or we are redistricting for as soon as September of 26, maybe 27, but as soon as 26, which would then brings us to the discussion on modular classrooms, because we would be still closing the South School. So modulars are also part of the redistricting committee's work. And those schools involved would be the Hanson, the Gibbons, the Daw, and we also believe the Wilkins will have to be discussed for modulars. The long-term costs for the modulars are simple. It's temporary. It's a 10-year out. They are not permanent modulars. They are temporary modulars with a general life of 10 years. I've been visiting some of the districts that have actually done these projects. Most recently, I was in Barnstable, where the building modulars weren't even connected to the building, causing a lot of stress around safety and weather, because things like fire code come into play the moment you put an extension on a building, where the rest of the building now needs to be. So we'd be looking at 3 to 4 schools. So the cost is temporary. And long-term, the solution is, do we want a 50-plus year plan, or do we want a 10-year plan? Since day one that I came on board, I've said that the support for this new building is grounded on not building elementary schools in Stoughton in the future. That's the plan. That's what the building committee concluded, the school committee concluded as I was coming on board, that the idea is to build to 50 years and not have to worry about new elementary schools in Stoughton, thereby creating the idea that the only leftover school to do is OMS. Now, if enrollment goes through the roof, yes, you could be looking at additions, reno additions. But based on the Hanson, the Daw, the Gibbons, and yes, even the Wilkins, which the last major project at the Wilkins that we have to do is the electrification process, because we have put new roofs on there, new windows on there, new bathrooms through town meeting and through MSBA projects. It's just fiscally for any of us that, and I won't be around in 50 years, but the fact of the matter is, do you plan for 10 or do you plan for 50? And do you resolve the issue that you're taking 2 schools offline, that you are not building new elementary schools, therefore no cost to the taxpayer, except, as we know, a major secondary project of O'Donnell Middle School, which has an impact on the entire town as well. So it's really important, I think, to continue with the facts of a cost now that is long-term, or a cost now that is less and temporary, and will require, hopefully during my lifetime, that I would have to be back 10 years from now as a taxpayer saying, okay, I told you so. We're going to have to do this again. The second part and concern that I have is, what is the long-term impact of modular classrooms outside of school buildings within Stoughton? What does that show people who want to move into Stoughton about Stoughton? I have a lot of thoughts on that, most of it that I cannot share publicly. Come have a cup of coffee and we can talk about it. It is not a positive to the town of Stoughton to decide that modular classrooms at its elementary schools is a future for the children or even taxpayers long-term. Because as we see, and since I reside in the community and been part of as a town meeting member, we do a lot of rebuilding of buildings around here and stuff because we refuse to spend the money wisely. I'll finish with this comment. We are just entered the highest increase in square footage by MSBA in the history of the MSBA. In other words, they just increased the square footage reimbursement by over $160. It's typically been in my 16 years, $35, $30, years without an increase. So we are seeing a benefit of that as taxpayers long-term as well on the reimbursement. So when you look at the fiscal responsibility of elected officials or appointed officials like myself, who will be a taxpayer or who is a taxpayer, the facts remain that the ability to pay for a 50-year plan is better than paying for a 10-year plan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chairman Recupero and Dr. Baeta. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee on Article 1, Elementary School Building Project? Chet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spoken to quite a few people in town, especially elderly people, and one of the questions that have been asked is, we went in April to vote, we voted no, and we were told, the town people were told that if we don't pass this, that we're going to lose MSBA money. Okay, well, that didn't happen. We got the extension. Okay, now they're coming up with the third one where we only have to pay $30 million and the rest is by MSBA. So my question that I can't answer is, where do we get that extra percentage? Is that something that we asked MSBA, or did they just come to us and say, because of the enrollment, low income or needy people, I don't know how to put it, but in other words, did they say that since we are mostly low income, the 52, 59%, whatever, is that affecting the MSBA to give us more grant money? And also, if we are going to pass this and it's $30 million, why do we have to have a debt override? Why can't we absorb that through the capital to our own budget and save 4.5%?
So, thank you, Chet. If I understand, I may be confused on a portion of your question, the $30 million difference. And I think that has to do with the net percentage reimbursement that we'll get versus the actual reimbursement rate that we have. So our reimbursement rate, as you see in the article, is 65.98%. That is for project costs that are reimbursable under MSBA regs. Not all costs are reimbursable. Site work, for example, there is an allowance for site work, but the large majority of our site costs are non-reimbursable, but it nets out for us at about $47 million, which is 42% net, as opposed to the actual reimbursement rate at 65.98%. So there's no change. There's been no change in the cost. I will say this. The extension, and Dr. Baeta can back me up on this because we both drilled down on this pretty extensively. We looked into all of the no vote, and actually DRA Carl Franceschi, the architect, did this also. We looked into all examples of districts that had no votes, what happened to them, whether they were granted extensions or not. The extension we were granted was unprecedented. We couldn't find, there's only one sort of comparable case, and that was a town that was granted an extension. They had to actually go out and prove support within the community. It was sort of conditional. I can give you the town, but I'd rather not. Joe knows it pretty well, too, because we both looked at it, and it was remarkable. It was the only one close to the length of the extension, the time extension that we had gotten. And I can tell you, if you read the extension letter, it was begrudgingly. MSBA didn't want to give us, that's my take on it, that's not theirs, but they certainly didn't want to grant an extension of time. There was a lot of requesting, lobbying, pleading for all of the work that we put into this, because of course, all of that work, or a lot of that work, would be lost. And of course, we'd have to go through the process all over again. And the average of projects, of districts re-entering the feasibility study process, they would lose 5 years in the reapplication, an average of 5 years, sometimes more, sometimes less. So we were, I think, lucky to get an extension as long as we did, and it was the longest that any of us had seen who have looked into it. So, but as to the cost we're not getting any more money from MSBA. Any difference is in there was a draft article back in March that said 42% in it, as opposed to 65.98. That was a draft article. That was the net. That was the approximate net that we'll get of the entire project cost. 42% is approximately what of the 112 that we'll be spending, MSBA will be granting us approximately 42%. But that doesn't represent, that's a net percentage. That doesn't represent our true reimbursement rate of 65.98. Did I explain? I don't know if I hit your question, Chet, so please. Yeah.
You threw a lot out there, and I just have what I've read, and so I'll look into it a little bit more and come back. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that, Chet. Carolyn, did you have a question?
Now, my question was about the previous speaker's figure about $1 million, but wait.
All right, thank you. Yes, we need a new mic. Dave, you have a question?
Thank you, Vaughn. I appreciate it through you. Basically, I have last year's motion. The motion read, as a previous speaker referred, provided further that any grant that the town of Stoughton may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 42% of eligible approved project costs. This is out of the motion, not the draft article. From the motion, as determined by the MSBA, then it goes on to or the total maximum grant, et cetera, et cetera. Then you look at this motion, not the article, not the draft, the actual motion. It says the same leading up language, provided further that any grant that the town of Stoughton may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 65 and 98% of eligible approved project costs. So there's a delta there, and whether you're talking about a portion of it or not, that's a difference in language between the motion and
No, that's not the motion. That's the motion that was printed for the book. There was a different motion that was put up on the screen that was made on the floor. I think the chairman can back me up on this. We had quite a bit of discussion about it because at the time that we had submitted the article, MSBA hadn't gotten back to us with its final approval. They wanted in there the gross percentage as opposed to the net percentage. So that's the difference. It's what you're reading from was printed in the book. That's not the motion that actually went on the floor of town meeting.
So what percentage was in the motion?
65.98%.
98 was voted in last
Yes.
May town meeting.
Yes.
And you're saying that that's a portion, because that's a substantial number if we're talking about the 114 or 112 million.
No.
It's a substantial percentage.
It's net versus gross, though. It's the same dollars. It's net versus, that 42% was, I don't want to say a placeholder, But we had a deadline to get an article in. The motion itself that was put on the floor, and there was quite a bit of discussion about this because we had to go back and forth with MSBA for final approval of the article. It was voted at 65.98%. This is 65.98%. What you're reading was we'll get a net 42% of our entire project, but that doesn't account for the non-reimbursable.
Okay, can you state the number, if we were lucky enough to get the full 100% of the grant that MSBA said we qualified for, what is the number that the town would be obligated to?
We can't state the exact number right now because we know the maximum.
That's what I'm asking. If we got the maximum grant, what is the town's obligation?
The maximum grant we will get is actually in I don't have it in front of me, but it's in the materials that I submitted. Yeah, this one. Maximum grant, that's on this total project budget summary page right. That is the maximum grant amount.
Carolyn, could you please repeat that with a mic so that everyone can hear that, please?
Sorry, $47,918,034.
Thank you very much.
Actually, we should.
Now, does the difference from the 114 million change the calculation on this new number that you're telling us, which is reduced by 1.25 million? What's the math if you're using the same 65.98? What is it?
If I can repeat your question. So because we reduced the project cost by 1.25 million, does that change our reimbursement amount?
Yeah, but we're also starting from a different number because the number, as you said, changed, right? We're at 113 instead of 114 from last year, right?
No, the article and the motion were identical. Actually, the chairman himself was the one that pressed for this. The article and the motion last spring was identical. It deducted out the $1 million for the feasibility study.
Okay, so this 113 that's in today's article is that 113 is the same number from last June.
No, the 113 is the 114 and change that you see in the article minus 1.25 million.
All right, so in the motion, in this article, and the paperwork we just got, it's showing 113, 157, 888.
Right.
And then you said there's 1.25 off. Is this including the minus 1.25?
I'm going to stop you for a minute there, Dave.
I just want to make sure.
But I'm going to stop you. I want to clarify this because I don't want to walk down the wrong road a bunch of times. The estimated cost is 113 million, but if you read the motion underneath, it's 112 million in change. I'm not going to.
All right, so it's 112.
I just want to clarify that because you're saying 113, and I want everyone to be on the same page on
Takes
this.
the million off.
The estimated cost in the article up top says 113. The proposed motion is 112, and then it also details that there's another $1 million that was already previously
The
spent.
112 is taking into account the reduction that was said, the 1.25.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that. You can continue your question, though. I just wanted to clarify that before we talked about it longer.
So if I may, Dave, Dr. Baeta explained this, I think, easier than I. So 114 is the total project cost from last spring. We deduct out the $1 million feasibility and the $1.25 million that we adjusted because of CM at risk. That leaves you with 112.
All right, so I'm seeing the town's obligation with 100% maximum grant, $64,239,854. Is that the number? Can anybody verify that that's the right number?
64.
239,854.
That's correct.
Okay.
That doesn't deduct out the,
All right, thank you. For anybody who's watching, that's the town's obligation.
and to your other point, because we adjusted the cost, did that change our reimbursement amount by a nominal amount? I mean, I think we talked about this today. I think it was hundreds of dollars, like a couple $100 only.
You good, Dave?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify another point on the 64 million town share that Mr. Laurie just mentioned. One of the things that is hard to put our fingers on, but we know will take place unless something drastic changes, is the tax incentive program that could potentially bring this cost to the town even further down. And part of that is, and there's a local community I just learned about through our partners that with those incentives receive $2.45 million. So we can't get into the details of that because we don't really know at the end of the day what will come back. But the anticipation is that it should be easily over $1 million if those incentives are still in play. Now, there's a lot going on in Washington right now, so things could change. It's not something that can be done by executive order. It has to be done by legislation. But those tax incentives are still out there that we would, through our partners, go after, thereby potentially bring costs down.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Baeta. Lisa, you have a question?
I have more of a few comments to make here. I think we still need to keep in mind that the taxpayers spoke. They said no means no, and the reason they're saying no is because the design, it's a lack of trust in the leadership of the town when they are not listening to the taxpayers to be cognizant of their hard-earned money. At the outset, the building committee was warned about taxpayer fatigue, and they proceeded to choose a design that is literally outrageously priced as compared to other cities and towns. The square foot cost is nothing short of outrageous, and that is because of the design of the building. We can build an elementary school for our children that is reasonably priced, okay? We have to keep in mind that our vendors take a percentage of the total construction costs. So it is up to our leaders to protect the taxpayers. The taxpayers are furious because they see our leaders not protecting the taxpayers. For example, in the high school, that auditorium fix for $441, the leaders couldn't get to the taxpayer fast enough to put that as an article on until they started getting pushback on this school, and rightly so said, oh, maybe we better wait. So I'm personally getting tired of being eviscerated for trying to protect the taxpayer. It is up to our leaders to design. We have a capital plan. One of our leaders stated that he's never heard so much about free cash and capital plan, and rightly so. That's been wrong. And I congratulate people for doing a combined capital plan, but on the budget, it's not even coming into play until next July of 2026. The taxpayers have had it. They know our leaders are not looking out for us. And the telephone is another example that we just recently passed at town meeting. The taxpayers were not looked out for. We got nothing. We lost all that money on the telephones. There's a problem with, I mean, it happens over and over again in this town. You can disagree with me. The taxpayers are behind me because they know.
It's not a disagreement. It's a misinformation that you were providing as an elected official to the public. That's the difference.
Through you, Vaughn, I would like to ask, what is the misinformation you're claiming?
The telephone comment is misinformation. That is literally the school department feeding the system that was needed at the time, and literally just being given what they were told they were going to be given at the time at no extra cost to the taxpayer.
Excuse me, Vaughn, through you, okay? We were told at this very Finance Committee meeting, Joel Woke, I asked the question specifically of Joel Woke. Did the taxpayers get that money back? And he said no, because it was during COVID and some other nonsensical excuse, which we hear all the time. So that is not misinformation.
Do you have
Thank
any other
you.
questions or comments on Article 1?
No, I think I've made my point. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa.
Mr. Chair, may I just respond briefly to one point?
Yes, Chairman Recupero.
As Ms. Lyons started out by saying that this project is overpriced, cost per square foot, I made a note on it. Cost per square foot in 2021, when we started this for a project built in the MSBA system, was $574. That was 2021. 2022, it was $606 per square foot. 2022, it was $669 per square foot. 2023, it was $770 per square foot. In 2024, as of August, because that's the last time I looked, I guarantee it's higher now, the median cost per square foot to build an MSBA school was $832 per square foot. I defy anyone to go out and buy and build a box of schools for $300 a square foot. I defy anyone also to get MSBA to approve that school, because they're not approving a box of classrooms. They want components that have dynamic impact on education. That's the cost of getting $47 million from MSBA. You build to their design standards. We are right in line with all other schools that have been designed and submitted for approval in this cycle. It's a high cost. But just to put perspective on this, in 2016, we started out on a high school for a design enrollment of little over 1,000 students. That high school was 120 plus or minus $1 million. I hate to say plus or minus when you're in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but it was 123, I think, was $1 million was the appropriation for that school. It came in pretty well below, about $5 million below that. An adjacent town, an abutting town, just approved a middle school with a design enrollment of just over 1,000 students. With just a middle school, by the way, so it doesn't have things like stadiums, doesn't have the facilities that a high school needs. That same school in an abutting school is about double what we paid in 2016. $230-something million for that middle school. We paid $123 in 2016. Costs have escalated. And we've had inflation in construction costs over the last 4 or 5 years that have put this up in the $830 per square foot median range. I doubt that they'll increase at that same rate, but I suggest to you they will increase. This project will be more if it comes back at a later date.
Thank you very much for that. Arnie, did you have a question? I thought your hand was up.
Based on a select board meeting, one of the select board members mentioned that Massachusetts is going off a fiscal cliff, and that's going to happen, they were guessing, sometime this year. If it does go over a fiscal cliff and we don't get the reimbursement from MSBA, what's plan B? We're going to be on the hook for $112 million.
The reimbursement funds have already been appropriated. They're sitting in an account for us. That's why MSBA is reluctant to give an extension, because they want to take those funds that have been segregated and set aside for Stoughton and use them elsewhere if Stoughton is not going to approve them. So those funds are in place, waiting for us.
Thank you for that answer. The second thing is, I'd like to just say that people of Precinct 6, I've talked to about half a dozen, and not half, but 2 dozen, excuse me, of my neighbors on either side of me, and every single one of them is either a senior, lower middle income. They bought their houses in the 60s, and this debt override is going to hurt them. One of the guys I got signatures for one of the articles, he was moving out the next week. He said, I can't afford the taxes anymore. He's moving. So this is not unusual. I have at least 5 seniors that are retired, and they bought their houses in the 60s. And they're all worried about this. So what we're looking at is, we'd like to see the school financed through the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie. Carolyn, did you have a question or comment?
Hi. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. First of all, is it definite that the South School is going to close regardless of this vote?
The answer to that is that the recommendation going from the redistricting will be to go via the modulars, because I have no space there. I have libraries in the hallway, so on and so forth. So yes, that is the intent.
So if this is if this project fails, the vote fails, the South School will close, and there'll be more modulars on a temporary basis at the 4 other elementary schools.
At least 3 of the 4 elementary schools.
At least 3 of the 4 elementary
Correct.
schools.
Yep.
Right. Do we know approximately when that would take place, or has that not been determined yet?
It hasn't been determined because, to be quite honest, we're waiting until April, but we are starting the process of getting people to go out and see what modulars do look like and what do they encompass and so on and so forth. Second part of that is typically every redistricting of an elementary district is a 12 to 18 month period for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the impact on families, so that you're giving families enough time for the babysitting or for transportation or whatever the case may be.
Okay, thank you. I guess my next question is, if this project is approved, will there be modulars while we build the new South School and the South School stay open, or has that not been determined yet?
It hasn't been determined, but it's a consideration we're going to have to review because of the concerns that we have with increased enrollment. Right now, that building is at over 300 students. We already have, like I said, we have the library and a hallway because we've had to use that space. I have some concerns about the space and the impact that it has on specialized programming, where the concern is that it doesn't meet the minimum requirement, i.e. OCR requirements. For example, having a space where you have students who may be deaf and hard of hearing, and the space is, basically gummed together, if you will, with glue to try to figure out how to make that work. We are in the second year of our NESDEC report showing a continuation of increased enrollment, and that's our biggest concern. So if you want me to just be outright, I can't say no that we wouldn't look at modulars at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, I guess I have another question, and perhaps, I don't know if you could answer this, or the people that are from the construction firm that are with the project firm, but could you build an elementary school, first of all, my first question is, how much is the site work on the current site, on the current proposed site?
If memory serves, it's about $18 million.
Okay, and what does that, what exactly does that involve? I'm just curious, I don't necessarily, cutting down trees?
Sure, everything that's not school building, and actually Carl Franceschi can talk specifics, but we have to get onto the site. And these are constants regardless of what side school.
Right, I understand that.
So you have to get onto the site from Park Street. That requires some bridging. There is a pretty decent sized length driveway to get into the site, to the buildable area. Of course, there's parking, field work, just general site work, grading, grubbing, grading,
Okay.
tree removal, and everything else.
All right, that helps. All right, so you would...
And by the way, I'm sorry, Carolyn, Those are only partially reimbursable by MSBA. They did increase the reimbursement for the reimbursement. They only reimburse up to a certain cap. I think it's 8% of our site costs. And I'm glad I have someone over my shoulder to look back at it. So, I mean, the vast majority of those costs are both fixed, regardless of what size school that you're going to build. And also, they're only partially reimbursable, a very minor portion of them reimbursable. So,
Thank you. So I guess that goes with my next question. If your site costs, no matter what the building or school, about 17 million, could you build, after doing those site costs, any sort of school building for 13 million of the remainder? The reason I'm asking is there's been people that believe that you can build a school for $30 million. And, I haven't seen anyone building a school for $30 million, never mind taking out the site costs of 17 million, leaving 13 million to build a building.
No, I mean, you can't because of the cost per square foot that it costs to build. But also, if you look at all of the schools that have been approved in the MSBA process, the average enrollment for those schools is about 600 students, 620 if I remember back over my shoulder. DRA looked at the last, I think it was 5 years. This is me talking, not MSBA, but it seems like they are trying to encourage consolidated schools so districts don't come back every 5 years for a new 300-student elementary school. In our case, they gave us the option of studying both, and the reimbursement was, I think, more cost, well, not I think, the math just works out, was more cost-effective to build the larger school. And as Dr. Baeta pointed out, that takes care of our elementary schools for 20 years and beyond. So,
And it also takes off a building project for the Jones School period, and whatever we do, it would probably be less expensive to use the Wilkins as a preschool than as an elementary school, because at some point I would think we would have to make sure it had the same benefits as all the other buildings would have as an elementary school, the same facilities and everything else to be equitable. I guess I do have another question. You said that, this company looked at all sorts of options, including an add renovate of the current school. And how much of the current South School, how much was that project estimated at?
we looked at several add reno proposals. The costs were all approximately the same, all across the board. Actually, I think Dr. Baeta might have them. This project was actually one of the lesser alternatives cost-wise than any other. Joe, I don't have my glasses on if you...
Yeah, we had a bringing up to code the South School ad renovation at no less than 78 million. But you got to remember that you're looking at a school at that point where right now a 300-student school doesn't work for us.
Right.
As a district.
So it would be a $78 million ad reno to keep the school at 300 students? Or would that reduce the capacity or expand the capacity?
It would reduce the capacity because of specialized classroom spaces that would have to be part of an ad renovation that we just aren't fulfilling as a district, never mind as a South School. So
the school, we would spend $48 million on a project that, would we get any reimbursement for?
So ad renos are also part of the renovation, part of a reimbursement, but significantly at times less reimbursement. I just actually did that in a district in comparison of new. But you have to remember that MSBA has to agree that its fiscal responsibility for an ad reno is as good or better than building a new building, which is exactly what I did in Norton at Norton High School.
Right. Which I could see they might be opposed in our case, because that means we would be coming back for the South, for the Wilkins, and more projects, and probably more money in the long run to do both schools, to the same level that it would cost to do a new school?
Yeah, there are school systems right now that are waiting almost a decade to get into the plan of becoming an MSBA project, and people literally having to update a statement of interest on a yearly basis, including a couple of local districts. I think the concern that Stoughton has to consider is the increased enrollment over time. And of course, it's cyclical, we all know that, but our ability to develop our own programs and so on and so forth internally is operationally our best outcome year to year, year over year, if you take a look at the costs of doing business by sending students out of district and all of that stuff. The second part is the ad renovation plan on that site is also not an easy one, right? Because that site is a difficult site. If you remember from the 1950 original to the 1960, the way that building is built is pretty significant because you're working around a lot of the bedrock and granite at the time, and that's why the building has these steps that either go up or come down depending on what part of the building you're on. So I'm not sure how much of a study this went into as part of the $78 million to say how much more actual work on site is going to have to take place as part of this reno addition. I will tell you that that would require modulars because you'd have to shut down part of the building, put up modulars, finish that part of the building, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so things like reimbursements for food services is going to go out the door for a year. Why? Because your cafeteria is going to be closed. You don't get reimbursed on brown bag lunches. You get reimbursed on hot meal lunches, as an example. That would have an operational cost to food services, and I can outline that down the road with other items, but it would have to include all of those other things that are now more costly than when these original plans were put together.
I do, I recall I was looking through all the various building committee minute meetings, and I believe it was the South School principal expressed concern about having a reno on site because, one, the water drains and the way the ledge is, that it's going to flood more into the building that's already there. Second, that traffic is already tight, and where you would put the modulars would be taking away space from traffic and make it even more, just creating more of an unsafe condition for traffic.
These modulars must meet all required code. These are not a modular where, you get a construction site and there's a modular there and the general manager goes in, the construction guys have a meeting. This is like sewer connection or septic systems. It's safety, it's electrical, it's AC, it's heat, it's significant cost for a period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Carolyn. Jonna, you have a question or comment?
Thank you, Vaughn. Yes, I do. I'm a little confused because at one of the previous FinCom meetings, I had asked about the renovations, and I was told it was based on a formula with the appraisal of the school in mind, and I think it was like 30%, and anything that exceeded that, even by $1. Is that correct? Thank you. And I then went and requested the appraisal, and I was told that an appraisal isn't part of the MSBA feasibility study process. I understand that it's not part of the process, but that wasn't my question. My question was, can I see the appraisal? And if there isn't one, then how did this formula get implemented?
Most of your questions are quoting words that I had said, so I'll answer the question. I never, ever said that there was, I never, ever said that it was based on an appraisal. If you look at the Architectural Access Board Code, it's based on assessed value, and it's actually equalized by a ratio that DOR publishes, and I have this whole formula that I ran. The assessed value of the building, by the way, not the entire parcel. The entire parcel, South School parcel, is assessed at about $5.5 million. The building is assessed at $3.88 million. So if you take that number and 30%, and leaving aside the ratio that you use to adjust that by DOR, because I think I think the difference is negligible on the adjustment. 30% of the assessed value is what we're looking at.
Is there any way I could see this formula brought out? Is there any way I could look at it?
I'll write it, and I have
Okay.
written it all out, but I can cut and paste it from
Thank you.
where I've written it, and then I've written it several times, written it out, so.
Okay, sorry, I haven't seen it, so thank you very much on that. And two other comments I wanted to make. They say that it's very expensive to make the building with the curved walls. Is that an added expense? Is that accurate? You know, it's supposed to be a safety feature, so they, if there was a shooter that came into the school, so I'm correct on that, correct? Okay. Given that, doesn't it work the opposite way? If the police were to come in and try to shoot the shooter, they wouldn't be able to get them because of the curved walls? Doesn't it work both ways?
One of the things that takes place with any school design is an intake of what the latest information is about safety within a building. Most of that information I'll defer to our specialists, but I know for a fact that discussion around the curvature, the expansion, the able to work outside of a classroom in a hallway, the types of windows that you use and all of that, that's all coming from literally the experts in the field. And I know that that expertise, at least in my last project that I've done, I know that that does contemplate taking in the latest information around shooters and all of that stuff.
Okay, but wouldn't that be something to really focus on? I mean, you don't want to have that implemented and then we find out it's not really a valid way of doing things.
Again, I'll defer. I don't know if, Carl, if you...
Safety is certainly a factor in design of all schools, and we work closely with law enforcement folks and public safety officials to make sure that the design is safe from their point of view, as well as obviously the other way around, safe from or providing for the education, meeting the educational goals of the community, as the superintendent mentioned, of having spaces that support collaboration, support informal learning as well as formal learning and so forth. So I'm not sure the curved walls you're referring to, the current design, I don't believe has any curved walls. There are some alcoves off of the corridors and so forth that can be supervised from the classrooms, and the design has been reviewed once, and it would be reviewed going forward too with local officials.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
had one more question. Oh my God. As far as the fact that the people have spoken, what is your comment on the fact that there's a lot of people that are concerned and feel that they can't afford this and will have to move? What is your comment on that?
Nobody from the building committee, not Dr. Baeta, not any member of the committee, and not our project team, would ever minimize the cost of this school on the taxpayer. When we did the high school, very early on, we set a hard cap and we stuck to it. We'll do that same thing with us. I will say that this town, for all of the talk about fiscal management, has managed things pretty well. Tax rates have gone down over the last several years. Property values since 2016. 2016, when we did the high school, the average property value in Stoughton was $307,000. Now it's $550,000. That's an 80% increase. So my point is that the tax rate going down, property values going up at the same time, I think things have been managed pretty well in this town. As a percentage of property value and as a percentage of household income, taxes have gone down in Stoughton as well. So, I mean, nobody would ever minimize it. But I will say this, and I think the independent working group, the report of which I did put in your package, they outline this pretty well. There's not zero cost if this project doesn't go through. There is a cost. And the cost is significant regardless. So the question is whether you can do this school or Plan B, and what Plan B would be. Do you want to do a box of classrooms? I don't think MSBA would approve that. I can't say that for sure, but they want dynamic buildings that meet their regs, that have educational components in them, that meet the educational plan of the community. They don't want a square box of classrooms that people walk into with no frills.
But there's a price to pay for that MSBA money.
Exactly my point.
Well,
There is a price to
I think it's
pay
a
for that
different-
money. We have to design
See
to
it
their
differently.
standards, and they're a true partner in this, and we have to design to their standards by their regulations, and that's the price for unlocking $47 million.
It's a deal with the devil.
We're not going to have a bunch of crosstalk here. Your question complete, Jonna? Thank you. Elliot, you have a question or comment on this?
I do have a few questions. What is the current enrollment now in the middle school?
I haven't checked in January, but I believe it's 824.
824?
Correct.
Okay. The new school will have a capacity of 600 students, give or take. The new, we talked about a potential new, definitely maybe a potential new middle school. Now, this elementary school that we're talking about here has a bunch of, several things in there that the SBA requires, as you put it, dynamic duo or something like that, that required to get the grant. Well, and like it had gymnasiums and several other things, not to go into the boring details. But the new middle school, will that require more of those accessories?
So middle schools are very interesting. Our middle school is not a middle school. It's a junior senior high school, or it's a junior high school. We moved it back in the 1990s. If you remember a recall of school committees that didn't want to do it, and then the school committees did it anyways, into a middle school concept, because educationally, the 20th century at the time was moving towards K-5 schools and 6 to 8 middle schools with heterogeneous groupings of students and so on and so forth. That was the educational philosophy then. It continues to be the educational philosophy today. So the question becomes, by the time we are looking at a middle school, what is the latest educational philosophy? What the town building committee will go through is, as it's done both at the high school and then now at the new building, the new elementary, is it'll do an educational plan. That educational plan is reviewed by MSBA to be able to meet the needs of students over 50 years.
Well, that's certainly, I know we know it's going to have to be updated, whether if the middle school or whatever we're calling it.
So if I may, as an example.
It's going to have more of than it does now.
Right, so I'll give you an example that has a cost. The square footage of a science lab. The science labs where kids take science, hands-on science in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at the current O'Donnell Middle School do not meet middle school philosophy of science.
Okay.
Gas, water, the type of tables that we're using, everything's changed since education reform, and then the curriculum frameworks came out on more hands-on. We're actually seeing that at the elementary level. So that would be one example of a cost that would be significant, because that building wasn't built as a traditional middle school with lab classrooms that you would have for a middle school, which also, the second part is the square footage. Children are bigger today than they were when that building was built. They just are. We're getting more square footage per student. At the high school level, it's not unforeseen to see 900 square feet or higher for a science lab, because of the amount of activity that takes place within a science classroom, as one example.
So the current school proposal here, the middle elementary school, and that is going to replace all of the elementary schools in Stoughton. It's going to be one consolidated elementary school.
The current recommendation is to build a new elementary school and then keep, as elementary schools, the Daw, the Gibbons, the Hanson, to go along with the new school. So you would have 4 elementary schools instead of 5, and the preschool would be moved to the Wilkins, which would no longer be an elementary school and wouldn't need all of the updates as an elementary school. In the projected millions, by the way, we wouldn't have to go that route because it'd be literally a traditional preschool. We'd have any type of changes would be significantly less money than anything to do around $1 million, except for the electrification that needs to take place in that building. But we would have from 5 elementary schools plus a preschool, we would move to 4 elementary schools only for K to 5 and 1 building as a preschool building, and probably with administration in it as well.
And so the middle school, if it, as it comes up, is going to, you said it was how many students in the current middle school?
So it's about 824, if I remember correctly. I can get you the specific number, but it's over 800, but less than 850. I know that for a fact currently.
Call it 800 for the sake of argument.
Exactly. Call it 800. And the fact of the matter is that MSBA, which does a whole different calculation, as we know from the high school project and this project, they have their own calculation formula on what they believe the size of the school building should be. We get that from them. We could push back on it and say, no, your numbers are wrong. We need it to be bigger here or there or whatever. But the fact is they make the final determination on the enrollment capacity of that building, not the building committee.
Well, so, not to belabor the point, but the new middle school then is going to have to be considerably larger than it is now.
So
and more expensive, obviously.
The issue is that it would be just like a new elementary school would be the first new elementary school since '71. It would be a new middle school that is actually a middle school and not a junior high school as we've had since that building was open. It was a 7-8 school that became a 6-7-8 school.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for that, Elliot.
Thank you.
Are you good?
I think I'll.
Okay. Carolyn?
Thank you. I just wanted to share something about the middle school. One of the reasons it converted to from 7th and 8th grade to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade because there was an enrollment crisis at the elementary schools, and it was easier to move the 6th graders and add on to the middle school than to have to add on to all 5 elementary schools.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. John, you have a question, comment?
Okay, so hypothetically perfect world, this goes through. What's the eventual land use plan for the Jones in the south? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to recoup the cost? Are we going to be able to bring some money back from that? Are we going to keep these as town properties, transfer to another department? What is the long-term plan for 171 Ash Street? And I honestly don't know the street address for the Jones.
I'm going to interject here before whoever's going to answers this. The select board took a vote last night, and they signed a letter regarding both properties at the Jones and the South School, and it's in the email. It just happened last night, so the email went out today, and there was a reference in there about if it were to pass, I guess there was discussion about having a article for a town meeting possibly to sell those properties, and that money would then be applied toward the South School project. If I have that correct, if not, hopefully someone will correct me. But that was the general gist, I guess, of the letter.
That's basically a great answer. Thank you, because we're looking at the idea of like, could we bring in even more money some way, shape, or form for this project so we offset it even greater?
Did anyone else want to answer that question? I just wanted to interject with that letter went out. Okay. You good, John? Do you have any other questions? Okay. Heidi, you have a question, comment?
I have to hold this because I'm short. I keep hearing that we need to plan and it needs to come out of the annual budget, the school. I'm just wondering if we did take the budget, if this gets voted down and we take everything out of the annual budget, like how does that affect the annual budget if we have to get the modulars, if we're not building the South School, like where is that money coming from? Because we have free money waiting for us, and it looks like there's people who don't want to take it, which baffles my mind. Because it seems like it would be cheaper for us to build this school than it would be for us to do the modulars and all of that other stuff. So can you talk to me about where this money is coming from in either scenario?
So I have a little bit of a history that I haven't spoken to this committee about around the idea of utilizing, things like capital money and or operational for the purposes. Well, first of all, if you decide to use whatever number it is per year over 20 or 30 years from your capital, you better have a lot of free cash coming in, and that's not always true, at least not in my time on the school committee and as a town meeting rep. So then what does it come from? It comes from operational cuts. So let's talk about communities that have done that. You're looking at a superintendent who spent 10 years in a district where a middle school was built using only operational funds. My budgets for 10 years were never where they should have been. Neither was police, neither was fire, neither was town hall, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's the reason why, and maybe I'm wrong, even when the Mass Taxpayers Association came up with Prop 2.5, they came up with this concept of buildings and debt exclusion, recognizing that it probably shouldn't be done in operational, within means. So we know that the economy is cyclical. So we know that as much as some buildings are happening right now in town are bringing in $4 or $5 million, we know that that money could become significantly less from one fiscal year to the other. One of the things we don't ever compliment around here, unfortunately, is that a lot of the free cash that becomes available is because of actually hard work by town employees to save money, but we don't want to talk about that. So at the end of the day, I don't believe, and I'll defer to those that are smarter than I am, but I can tell you right now, taking $30 million and X out, let's say even this project, which I believe I said to you folks would be just shy of $4 million a year in principal interest over X number of years, you're counting on free cash, and then you're counting on no capital investment. Because unless you make more than that payment every year coming out of a combination of operational and free cash, you can't invest in anything else unless you have significantly more. You've made a commitment to not use free cash in the operational budget. Respectfully, I think it went too fast, but that's okay, we'll do it. And you've said we're going to use it for capital. I don't think that's a bad idea. I'm working with the town to make sure that the school department is part of that plan. And thank you to those who supported that article, by the way. But if you have $5 million in free cash today, and you're going to be taking $4 million of it to pay for something, you better hope you have that $4 million, and now you're down to $1 million in free cash, and now you're just borrowing all the time if you're in fact going to make capital adjustments to public buildings, regardless if they're schools or whatever. So you've got a potential police department addition renovation coming on. I don't know what the cost will be for that. Or if that's going to be the feasible way, or if we're doing something else. I don't know yet because I haven't heard anything, but I'm sure we're going to hear about that. So in my 16 years in this role, taking money like that is, I think, fiscally irresponsible, because it puts too much pressure on the ability for you to actually have what we don't talk enough about in Stoughton, and I think I can say this as the superintendent and as a resident. There is no community that offers more services to its children, its elderly, its multilingual community than this community does. We have some of the best roads. I mean, people come through town when there's snow, and what do they compliment? Our roads, not a couple of towns over, right? I know this because I hear it, and I live in town. So we're not doing enough of that. What we're doing is, let's kick the can again. Let's kick the can again. I sat in, not the finance committee, but town meeting, and had votes like all of you have taken, those of you that have been around for a long time, and we kicked it down the road. That's the reason why we're here. I mean, look at the fire station. We kicked it down the road. Police station, we kicked it down the road. Many of us voted against the police station because we thought it was an awful location and we had concerns about the space. Here we are decades later talking about it. Or let's take the monkey or the elephant in the room, the big one, the substation. And how many years was that closed for? because it shouldn't have never been built there? In this particular case, we have a plan. We're providing the plan so that the can doesn't get kicked down, so that now we're not building new elementary schools. That in itself is a reason why folks like my family, my elderly mom, who just recently lost her husband, my dad, is still going to go in and vote yes. Not because her son's a superintendent, but because if she's ever going to say yes to taxes, it's going to be to build new buildings, because she knows that long-term it's an investment. It's like building a house, it's an investment. So I don't think it's fiscally prudent or responsible to say we're going to stick $64 million over a 20 or 30-year bond into an operational budget. Others have difference of opinion, of course.
All right, thank you very much for that. Mark?
Good afternoon, thank you. Sorry I was late. On the question of cutting back or taking stuff out of that, what's the cost per student that we spend with our budget? Do you know?
Last audited numbers are slightly over $18,000.
Per student?
Yes.
And
That's all in audited, so that means that's healthcare costs, that's everything.
What's the average?
It's about a $1,600 average statewide, about $1,600 more as a statewide average than Stoughton. The last number I checked, and that is in roughly, I want to say like last April or so. And those were of 24. And remember, audited numbers with DESE literally takes 18 months to 2 years before you see them because of all the stuff that happens in the background. So those are audited numbers.
So we're already spending under the medium on that, so there's nothing even to cut there.
If you multiply 1,600 by the number of students, that would be below that average, yes.
Okay, so, all right, just wanted to make sure that on that.
All right, thank you, Mark.
You reminded me of one point about this project cost. So we still have the ability, the building committee, I mentioned before that the condition of MSBA for the extension is that we couldn't change the scope of the project. We still do have the ability to do value engineering, to reduce cost in certain ways with building materials and whatnot. This building will be priced throughout the course of the next year after it's approved. It will be priced out several times. This was reminded to me by Mr. Franceschi behind me. And each time we'll be able to evaluate that cost. Each time we'll be able to do some sort of value engineering, look at alternatives for building materials, and to maintain a cost cap, I can put it that way, because that's what we used at the high school. We can still do that. I know that wasn't part of your question, but you mentioned how, we can't touch you were speaking about a different issue, but we can't touch the scope now. We can once it's approved and it's in the process, and we're designing it with over the year after the approval. So I thought that was an important point, and thank you for reminding me of it.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Ian?
So if I understand correctly, we've spent about $1 million to get to this point. So, ballpark, how many people would you say have been involved, in the various studies?
At some point, elementary staff, support staff, the building committee members, and numerous different PAC organizations and all of that stuff that have been part of this project asked questions, including folks that voted against the project have been involved in some way because they've come out and asked questions or gone to meetings or whatever. So a significant number, I would say.
So do you have any evidence or suspicion that there is some hidden plan that would cost significantly less than what we have on the table with all the people involved with $1 million spent? Is there some 50% plan that we just don't know about?
I don't see it based upon building for 50 years for 600 students. And I think that's the component. I'm never going to see the benefit of a 50-year building because I don't have children that are going to be attending that building. I'll be paying for it. That's it. So I just haven't seen it. I know that there's supposedly information out there to build a 300-student school and all this other stuff, none of it vetted. But I don't see how that could be done at the cost of what TJ said earlier, which was the increase in the square footage that continues to go up. I will say this, to TJ's earlier comment just a few minutes ago, the building committee, if this comes to fruition, is not putting a shovel to the ground until probably 26 at the earliest. We all know what happens to costs. So the building committee is going to have to do what it did with the high school project, in my opinion, which is to say we have a hard number and we're sticking to that number. And if we have to make changes by not having a X or Y or Z because it's too expensive, that's what the building committee, that's what every building committee does, I would suggest. So I just don't see it.
I think the working group tried hard to find it, though. If you look at the working group report, they tried hard to find a less costly alternative. And in the end, I think you see the results.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments here? Dave?
Thank you, Vaughn. Do you? I think it's fair to say that the idea of doing an ad reno, nobody wants to do an ad reno. I don't see anybody advocating for one, but I don't know why it keeps coming up. It keeps coming around and around as if that's the thing that is going to happen. The other thing is with modulars, nobody's advocating for modulars, although only time I hear a common sense aspect of modulars is because we're going to have to use modulars if we try to do this monstrosity, which is a pinwheel design, 3 stories for 600 students. Then you got to get modulars because that's part of the project plan. So that's the only time in which I hear modulars making any sense, because nobody's advocating for a 10-year plan for modulars. I don't hear anybody doing it except for when we hear presentations like this tonight. So if nobody wants modulars and nobody wants ad reno, and we kicked the can already 8 months and it's on its way to be in 10 months by the time we get to April since last June, why didn't we look at the alternative of replacing the South School with another school for the students there? And by the way, I went to those early meetings and it was for an enrollment of 225 students compared to 515 with the combined. And now it's inflated to 300, which, okay. But let's look at 300 compared to 600, since we're talking about inflated numbers anyway. Why aren't we looking at the common sense thing, which is a 50-year school or longer on a simple school that the town could afford? Because guess what? Sometimes you can't afford the most efficient, grandiose, forced down your throat from an MSBA source, these nameless, faceless people who come in with this invisible hand and say, you must do this. And then you end up looking at it saying, oh my God, I can't believe we can't build the school the way we want or that we could afford. But here we are. So why is it that we can't take, since June 12th, why didn't we take a look at the common sense thing, which is to do a replacement school, which was what everybody, I advocated for it, I went and campaigned for it. I said, we need to replace this school. I never said we need to ad reno this school. I never said we needed a monstrosity. I've always said this school needs to be replaced. That goes back a few years ago when I campaigned. All right. I don't understand why the binary choice that you put on the table has nothing to do with what anybody in this town even wants or even agrees with you about, which is we must have modulars if we say no. I don't think so. I think there was an idea that we had to replace a 225 enrollment school, and I'm okay with the 300 because guess what? Recently, we want to talk about, we've heard people commenting about, anecdotal things. I just had my furnace go out right in the middle of a cold snap. Worst thing you have to go through, trust me. Well, there were a lot of choices put on the table. And the most efficient ones, the ones that give you the biggest reimbursement by the government, were the ones I couldn't afford. And guess what? I ended up going with one without the reimbursement, but I got a brand new furnace that works. Sometimes you can't reach for the brass ring, and you end up just taking the ride on the Ferris wheel, and you take the project you can afford. Because sometimes you have to work with neighborhood schools. And by the way, I have a question about redistricting. We use these broad strokes about the redistricting that's inevitable no matter what. But isn't there a sharp difference between redistricting when you take away a school versus we have some pain because there's an extra couple hundred students, we have to put some students in different schools? Every year there's an idea that you might have to redistrict every single year. But that's a lot different than taking a whole school offline, isn't it? Tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a sharp difference between the two types of redistricting?
In both instances, the redistricting plan is with a new school because you're closing down that elementary school, the two elementary schools, because the Wilkins would become the preschool. So you're still closing two schools that had K-5s, and you're making them into a 1 K-5 with only 3 other buildings. Redistricting around the South School being closed because there's no new school is just simply because we're not going to put a penny into that building right now. That doesn't get us anywhere. It just doesn't make fiscally any decision, any positive to spend millions of dollars. And by the way, based on the prior discussion around the assessed value, once we hit a certain threshold, then we kick in all of these new regulations that we have to do. So let's say the roof at the South School tomorrow, God forbid, had a catastrophic situation at midnight, nobody in the building, and we had to, fix that roof. Well, guess what? Inspector General's office is not going to give you the break that, the assessed value isn't something you're going to have to work with. So now you're fixing the roof and you're becoming ADA compliant. Redistricting, since the beginning that I got here, has always been in play for either situation because we have an enrollment increase in the district. We are continuously creating and wanting to create specialized classrooms. I'm going to give you a perfect example. I have to open another therapeutic learning center next year at the Wilkins because I have 11 students from the preschool in that program. 10 years ago, Dave, you wouldn't be talking about these numbers. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, these types of special circumstances and learning challenges and physical challenges and emotional challenges with kids were not even close to the numbers that we're seeing throughout public education, not just Stoughton. The idea that we have to open up a program with 11, it's like historically new to Stoughton. We've never had to do that. We've always had programs, so that takes up space, time, and that means we have to redistrict in order to put students in the right place. So one way or the other, you're redistricting.
You take out a school versus the changes you're talking about. Is there a sharp difference? Are they all kind of the same? Like, oh, we're going to have to displace 500 students? We're going to have to displace 200 students? How many students get displaced between completely shutting down a school because you're consolidating the two schools together versus replacing a school with another school in the South, leaving Wilkins online? Is there a difference?
Yeah, when you look at redistricting, the first thing that you need to do is you know where your buildings are going to be. So you make that determination that you have X buildings and they're located here. And then the second thing that you do is a heat map. You look at where are the current students and where they're going to be when you redistrict and what does that mean. And then you have to recut the district by street, by area of town to where they're going to go. If you don't build a new school in South Stoughton, we know that all of South Stoughton is going somewhere else.
But is redistricting in a normal situation where the status of 5 schools with the number of students you have to manage, are you looking at X, and then if you take down the school and consolidate, you're going 3X in terms of redistricting? What is the magnitude of change in redistricting from 5 schools to 4?
Every student, regardless, every student in kindergarten through 5th grade will be looked at what school do they currently look at, and if you're changing that because of numbers and programs, where would they go next?
You're saying it's the same? You have the same level of redistricting regardless of how many schools you're working with? Is that the statement you're making?
In general, yes, but with the understanding that I also have to look at things that you just don't do by saying redistricting. For example, I can't have a school that creates a poverty school. I can't have a school that creates a special education school. I can't have a school that is targeting ELL only. I can't, and so on. Those are all part of that redistricting. So when you're looking at the numbers and where the students are coming from, that shift as part of the reporting out will take place based upon all of those issues, not just you're in this part of town, that part of town. An example that we use is we shift students from one part of town to another part of town for the purpose of a specialized classroom because of the number of students.
But we're just splitting hairs over how much redistricting occurs either way. Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
I'm just trying to...
No, what I'm suggesting to you is that if you're opening a building that has 600 kids, and you currently, just for the sake of argument, you have a building with 300, at least 300 other kids are going to be moving. But within the 300 that you think would staying, they may be going elsewhere because of where they live. They may be, it could be 400 kids that are impacted, not the 300 kids. Because in redistricting, the South School kids just don't stay at the South School. It all depends on where they're going to live and where the shift is going to take place. That's just the way it happens. I've done redistricting. It's a matter of looking at, it's not just, here's your heat map, and you just say, okay, those 3 families go here now, and those 2 families go over there now, and we're done. It's
right,
literally...
But they're almost the same.
They're a lot alike in many ways. It's just the shift is dependent on a lot of other things than just saying 300 kids.
All right, so here's another, I'm not done.
Okay, I'm just trying to move this along.
I appreciate it, but I'm changing topics on the same project. So I just want to understand about the finances of a school, regardless of, of what changes might have happened with all the adjustments on today's article. Where is it in the rules of MSBA that says the only way to fund the town portion is with debt exclusion? Is there a mandate that says the only way the town's portion can be funded is with a townwide vote?
There's no regulation that says that. I will say this. The article itself contemplates that this is a debt exclusion.
No, that's not my question.
No, yeah. Let me finish, please. Yes or no, the policy of how the town pays for that, whether it's inside the budget or as a debt exclusion in future years, once that's authorized, is entirely up to the select board, town meeting, or whoever else.
It is. So that isn't a mandate. There's no mandate from the state.
No, but the article would have been different.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. But articles, obviously motions change. People come up with alternate motions all the time.
What I'm saying is, if this wasn't going to be a debt exclusion, the text of the article would have had to have been different. It's a yes, for MSBA, it's a yes or no question. A debt exclusion is authorized. How the town deals with it on its end is entirely up to policy.
That's what I'm asking.
Right.
All right. So we had people throughout town, past officials, current officials in the town, floating different ideas. Some of them have to do with a split, similar to what happened with the fire station. Other ideas have to do with reducing the levy in order to offset some of the pain that people are feeling, that we can lower the levy, maybe put some of that money into debt service, especially when our debt service fell below, probably by now, under 2%. It was at 2.5% exactly this time last year. So if there's debt service capacity, what would be preventing us from moving in that direction? If there's capacity and revenue, projected revenue, why are we putting the entire burden on the taxpayer when clearly the MSBA doesn't care? Because it's your problem, not theirs.
Well, we're not.
No, not you. I mean you, the town of Stoughton. I apologize for how I said that.
If that's a policy decision in later years, that's entirely up to the policy boards.
Well, that's relevant in this discussion, in this hearing, isn't it?
But we don't determine it, though.
Well, we're having a hearing.
No,
right?
But for the article and the appropriation, We're just looking for an appropriation. And the appropriation carries with it contemplating a debt exclusion. How that's paid for in future years is up for discussion by, again, the policymakers. We have no say in that.
Right. So,
Can I don't want to interrupt you because I know you have several questions, but I wanted to get back to the first thing that you said about the modest school for 300 students only, because you did follow us at the beginning, I know, Dave, and we did look into that, and we did price that out, and I wanted to add a little perspective to it. The construction cost difference, and I just pulled this up to remind myself of it, the cost of construction of the larger school, and I should clarify, the 225 is MSBA's approved design capacity, or design enrollment, excuse me. It has a capacity of 300 students, but they're reimbursing us based on a design enrollment of 225. As a matter of fact, the original design enrollment that they set for us for a single school was 185 or 186. We went back to them and pushed for a higher design enrollment for both a single and a consolidated school, and they increased it. The construction cost only, I'm just talking bricks and mortar, steel, of a single school, the difference between a single school for 300 with a 300 student capacity and the consolidated school with a 600 students capacity is about 14 or 15 million dollars. And I appreciate when we talk about millions of dollars, minimizing it by saying, only. So it was like $66 million for the smaller school, construction costs only, about 80, closed it down now, $1 million construction costs only for the consolidated school. One of the requirements under the MSBA regs is that we put in front of them a cost-effective solution. And that's what MSBA is asking us for, is a solution. That's how the regs talk. Doesn't ask us to design the greatest school. It asks us to provide a solution to Stoughton's educational needs. One of the requirements of those regs, as I said, is cost-effective solution. We looked at a single school and the cost of a single school. We looked at the long-term, even short-term needs for Stoughton school facilities. And the difference in construction costs between the two was for $88 million, I can pull it up and cite them exactly if you'd like, but double school, if I can put it that way, and a $64 million single school. That wasn't enough of a gap for us to say, let's be cost effective, because there's another $80 million coming down the road in the foreseeable future. What we were doing was not doing what had been done to get us to that point, which was not do any work on our school facilities for 50 years to the point where we were in crisis. And I think it's fair to say the South School is in crisis. So I apologize for taking your time. I wanted to justify why I voted for that solution. And again, it was a solution.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from Elliot now.
I didn't finish. I still have the floor.
Do you have another question?
I just have a comment.
Okay.
I just asked questions, and well, I started with a comment, but I'll sandwich it. I'll sandwich the whole set of questions with another comment. If the MSBA only looked at these unbelievably designed buildings, I could just say, oversimplify everything and say, well, if they're going, you do business with the MSBA, you got to buy a Rolls Royce, and the net number that you have to pay for is outrageous. But they don't. They actually have lower cost schools, because I've seen them. I've seen them because I go to some meetings. I go to ATFC meetings and I talk to people, and they're saying, I can't believe how much you're paying for your school. It's unbelievable, because you get twice as many students in some schools for less than we're paying for this one.
I've looked at every project.
I'm telling you, TJ.
Name them, and I'll tell you why they're less.
And if they're as expensive as us, then the oversimplified statement of the only way to do business with MSBA is to buy a Rolls Royce, and good luck if you could afford the difference after your grant, when we could only afford a Chevy without any help from the state. And by the way, when you buy the Chevy, you could at least put the design together the way that actually meets your needs locally by local decision makers, because this is what we need, and this is what we're going to ask town meeting to appropriate to do it, as opposed to saying, you must do this, and here's the limits of how much you can have in blah, 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 on and on, chapter and verse about all the limitations they're putting on you. So I don't know. If it's always a Rolls Royce, I'm not in favor of MSBA grants because I can't afford the difference after they pay it.
Can I
right,
simply,
thank you.
in less than 1 minute, just address Mr. Laurie's? So
Then we're going to move on.
having done 5 different projects over my time, both accelerated repair and new projects, I can assure you and the public that the building committee's information, we actually have the memo, they received and then responded back to the 13 different options that the building committee went through. They received information, and that's in your packet, I believe. And if it's not, I'm happy to get you a copy of that letter, but it is online on the building committee website on stoughtonschools.org. And I know this because I've sat in the seat having to go through all of that, knowing, in the case of one of my communities, knowing that I needed to build a new school, I still had to go through and show them ad reno and all of those other options and locations and so on and so forth. In this project, it was 13 that are listed on a memo received back from MSBA. It was sent to MSBA with all the options. It came back with the understanding that that project would be the best project, which also has a higher cost to MSBA. So they clearly were giving us more money because it was a more expensive project, and they knew that and put those funds away anyways. I just want to make sure that and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Laurie, I really do. I get the Chevy and the Malibu and whatever else car you like, and I don't like Rolls Royce, yes. I don't have one of those. I have 3 used cars, for the record. So I get it, but for the sake of public information, they do review all of the options that they require your local building committee to go through.
All right, thank you very much for that, Dr. Bayetta. Do we have any other questions, comments from the committee? New questions, comments? Elliot, because we want to get to the public at some point, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about the influx of new students to the general Stoughton school system. And now, regardless of the source of these new students, is there state aid, considering now that Massachusetts was considered a sanctuary state, and we had a heavy influx of students, which is going to create, assuming they were just English speaking, we'll say, but those students are going to require ESL and lots of other services that we currently either stretch to the limit or don't have. Is any of these expenses going to be offset by the state?
Is this a
money
question?
that they're
Elliot,
already collecting.
Elliot, let me stop you for a second. Is this a question in regards to Article 1?
Well, yeah,
I mean, we're looking for questions, comments regarding Article 1, which is the elementary school project, not budget questions for students.
well, I
just want to stay on topic here.
You're probably. I just wanted to know if state aid is available with the increased amount of students.
We want to keep
in this
on Article
school.
1, though.
All right, as you wish.
I think that sounds like more like a budget question.
Excuse me, I'd like to interrupt. I think it's relevant.
Apparently you do.
I apologize if I'm out of turn, but I'm just saying his question has to do with enrollment. Enrollment is affecting the size of the school.
Dave, his question wasn't.
It was about enrollment.
Asking, Arnie, do you have any questions, comments on this?
Yes, I do. I have to step back a couple discussions back. One of the things is looking at pricing of school, and I can name 3 that are more reasonably priced. One is Fitchburg for 845 students. Their total budgeted cost was $65,000.
65,000?
It's getting late, I'm sorry. 65 million. That's wishful thinking. Let's go 65. The other one was Groton Dunstable, and that was for 645 students for $78 million. It's getting late. And then if you're looking at a smaller school for 315, Randolph was able to build one for $50 million. So there is schools out there that are being built for a lot less than what our school is. And if we had already looked at that, we could have had an MSBA funding and been paying a lot less than $64,000 after the MSBA.
All right.
60.
Thank you very much for that discount, Carney.
All right.
Mr. Chair, so Fitchburg was built in 2021 when the median cost per square foot was $574.
Fitchburg was started in March of 2022.
I'm looking at it right here.
Okay, we're not going to have a debate on what year Fitchburg built the school.
They also, this is an important point, they also get a different, what you're talking about is the cost to the community, not the cost of the project. They get a different reimbursement rate than we do. We get every project that you bring to MSBA, you're assigned a reimbursement rate, and it's based on a three-factor formula based on community wealth, community poverty, demographics. I might get that slightly wrong, Doctor. And they set a reimbursement rate for that community, the balance of which is paid for by the community. For example, in the high school, I think our reimbursement rate was 59%.
They got a 26.
We're not going to have a bunch of cross discussion here.
But
Let
the
TJ finish.
information is right here. I'm reading it right from the site.
Those communities have a higher reimbursement rate than we
We
do.
get $26 million grant on a $78 million cost, total construction cost. It says it right here.
So Arnie, the total cost, $78 million for Groton, right?
78 million
Okay.
minus a maximum facilities grant of 26.5 million.
Okay, thank you for that. And Fitchburg,
Yeah.
65 million total.
What?
Fitchburg, 65 million total. Is that the total cost to the community or total cost of project?
Total cost of the project is 78 million.
For Groton and Fitchburg?
That's for Groton. And the maximum facilities grant is 26 million.
All right, thank you for that.
But there's also the same thing with Fitchburg and with Randolph. The numbers I gave you were their total construction costs before the MSBA grants.
All right,
So
thank
we
you.
could have saved a lot more money.
All right, thank you for that.
I guess my only, I'm not going to debate that you're reading something off of a website, so I don't want to be disrespectful, but what was the square footage in 21 or 22 compared to now? In terms of the cost? Because we know from earlier, through TJ, directly from starting back in 21, that the square footage cost is up almost from 521, it's almost $400 more.
It doesn't show the
multiplied-
square footage cost, but
Right.
the square footage is 109,855 for Groton.
But my point is the actual cost
What
per
is it?
square footage that at the time is an industry charge. If you look at it, we are dealing as a community, not only Stoughton, but everybody, on what? Post-COVID increases in labor and square footage costs for materials and supplies.
But they don't-
That's a perfect example, respectfully. If it was $521 a square foot, we know that we're approaching 900 right now, and over 900 actually, I think, right now. So that's a $400 square foot change. You multiply that by square footage, you're going to see that project couldn't be done. We couldn't have done Stoughton High School. What would Stoughton High School be at $900 a square foot? I want just think of that, 150,000 plus square foot building. What would we have paid today at $900 a square foot versus what we actually paid?
With all due respect, Dr. Bayetta.
Sure.
Both of those schools are currently under construction, so chances are their square footage is going to be a lot less.
I don't know that. I'm
guessing because it's not on this site.
Well, I'm suggesting that our square footage is based on information that we were working on based upon getting into the system. So I'm going to suggest that those prices are higher than we think.
Okay, do we have any other questions, comments? Ian?
I'd just like to address kind of some of the observations. It sounds like, based on the Fitchburg numbers, the Groton numbers, that we're getting close to double the money from the MSBA. I think it was 47 million compared to something in the 20s for both of those examples. And in addition, what I hear with those numbers is that you can't build an elementary school these days for under 75 million. So if we don't get MSBA funds, I'm not sure how we do move forward as a town with this project.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ian. Any last questions here? Jonna?
Thank you, Vaughn. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say that initially the No people were pursuing renovation. They thought that would be the most prudent. And then we compromised and said, okay, to the new school. But what compromises did we see from the Yes people? I don't see much more than a few crumbs off the top of the amount of money that, and maybe a project manager that they deleted. It just is very distasteful to know that the bottom line is that you lost the vote because a lot of people can't afford this and they chose not to have it. And now, instead of abiding by the wishes of the people, you're just pushing this down our throats anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonna. Lisa?
Hi, so back to the original on the site cost, okay? We have a site like almost across the street from where it is that wouldn't require bridges and cost 17%. I mean, like, the public can't get their heads around the choices the leadership has made on this project, okay? It is through the roof. The design, we could have met the educational plan with a much more reasonable and practical priced design. The fact that the design is costing outrageous, design matters. For you to say that, through you, Vaughn, for our leaders to say that you can't build a school for X, Y, Z, to use Mr. Laurie's point earlier, you can get a school, whether it's a Rolls Royce or a Chevy, or if it's Taj Mahal or a reasonable building. This is what the taxpayers want. At some point, taxpayers are at capacity. Government runs on taxpayer dollars. The fact that they're not comprehensive, complete planning in this town, okay, is causing the taxpayers to say, heck no. You start thinking of us, meaning the taxpayers, because they're the ones funding all this, to not have a capital plan until July 2026, to be using all the new growth and free cash to say we came down to zero on free cash. We can disagree with that, but the budget is actually being closed.
We're going to try to stay on Article 1. We're not going to get into discussions on budgets.
Okay.
Article 1.
This
Thank
is
you.
about how to fund that project. That is not putting a debt override, debt exclusion on the taxpayers. And the taxpayers are going to say no again. They do not want modulars. They see the leaders delaying getting these kids a school reasonably and practically priced, okay? And that could have been done, started on June 12th. And instead, you're ignoring the taxpayers, and it's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
May I respond, Mr. Chairman? You can say no.
Yes, that's fine. Then we're going to go to the public.
Just to Ms. Lyons' comments, I'm just not your superintendent. I'm a taxpayer. I don't like being called dishonest. and I don't like my integrity in question. Unfortunately, I also made a comment earlier towards you that I shouldn't have, and I publicly will apologize for that right now. I do not want to go back and forth with you. It doesn't gain us any positives for the children or the taxpayers. So my apologies. My vested interest is both as superintendent and as a taxpayer. I do not want to continue as a taxpayer to build new elementary schools when I can resolve an issue right now. As it pertains to the issue of the Taj Mahal, it's the same phrase. We didn't know each other then. I'm not sure how involved you were. It was the same phrase that certain members of this committee and town meeting members used for the high school. Matter of fact, one of them spoke at town meeting, calling it the Taj Mahal right before I spoke as a town meeting member in favor of the new high school. It's always a Taj Mahal for certain people. It will always be a Taj Mahal. It will always be a Taj Mahal. I understand cost. I get it. It's expensive. I understand that. But I'm also sharing with you that long-term, a perfect example is the capital plan. I'm very happy to tell you that I have fought very hard with the full support of the school committee to get a capital plan for the school department that you can have as a FinCom and we can, working with the town manager, do something about. I wasn't here before that. I couldn't help you with that. My point is, it's going to be a Taj Mahal no matter what. I know no voters that are going to vote no matter what. I understand that. They can't afford it, or they don't want a new school, or whatever the phrase may be. But our job as a building committee was to establish the educational goals for the next 50 years of the only elementary school that we are going to build in Stoughton, probably over the next 50 years. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Bayada. Okay, I guess that's all the questions, comments from the committee. Do we have any questions or comments from the public on Article 1 Elementary School Project? Article 1 from the special town meeting. Any questions or comments from the public on Article 1? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record. There's a microphone right there. Make sure the green light's on. Speak loud and clear for everyone at home.
Yes, good evening. My name is Leo Fay. I'm a resident. I've also recently been added to the school building committee. And I never expected to see the vileness in this meeting tonight. Kind of taken back by it a little bit. And I didn't think that should be done in this forum. You know, I got involved because I thought I could help with the committee. I know the no vote went through. And I thought there's a better way to come up with a plan, represent it to the town. The town has a right to vote again. Everybody has a right to vote. But people are being looked at as being bad for asking a revote. That shouldn't be a bad thing. It should be a right to have it voted on again. Now, Mr. Laurie, you had a question about the school, and if we built a smaller school at 300 student capacity. But part of the plan is to use the Wilkins School for the preschool, which I think has to be done in 2 years. So if we didn't open up the room at the Wilkins for the preschool classes, there'd have to be another building somewhere that would have to be built. So you'd have a 300-student South School built, but then you'd have to have another school for the preschool in 2 years. So what we're doing is trying to pre-plan and prevent that additional building and make the space for the preschool. And I just would really like everybody to step back a little bit, think a little bit more about what we can do for the town. We're all here working for the same purpose, to make the town better. We shouldn't be fighting in public like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leo, and thank you for taking part in getting on that committee there, Leo. Any other questions, comments from the public on Article 1? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record. Speak Loud and clear into the microphone. Make sure the light's green, too.
Good evening. Marina Ryans, Prison 7. So I've been hearing about, South School, and I've been listening to school people and school officials. So what I've noticed since June 12th, when the people voted no, so I believe there is a war that started by the school. And I can say that the situation is completely out of control. It's completely chaotic. And I can say that school people pushing, even being at this meeting today, they're pushing the school, very expensive, without giving any alternatives, without acknowledging the votes of the people. So I didn't even hear school officials say, yes, majority of the town residents voted no. Instead, at one of the meetings at the select board, school officials said, it's a minority. No, it's a majority of the residents of Stoughton voted against the school. People didn't vote against the school as the educational facility. People voted against expensive project. And we would love to hear from school to say, we respect your votes, but we're going to come up with alternative solution to make sure that the residents will accept the fact and will vote yes. I want to tell you that the only reason, the only alternative we will accept is for reasonable school. And it was mentioned before that lesser expensive schools were built. And I'll tell you right now, and I will vote yes myself, if the school is at least half less for the price that currently is presented. So we cannot afford it. Is it this clear for school officials? They push us. They push this project on us without any consideration. They use their own kids. They are aggressive. They are disrespectful. They yell, they interrupt, they censor the Facebook socially. They censor and remove people, including myself, because I put a very polite comment simply against the school. And school official being so desperate that he put his message twice on the Facebook group of Stoughton, not only in English, but also in Portuguese. Why only in Portuguese? There are other minorities live in this town. It's pathetic, I'm sorry to say. School officials and the town officials are out of control. We want to hear that the school price is cut significantly, that the rest of the price will be covered by the town from the budget. And don't push this project back on us. We will fight back, I will assure you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments from the public? Cynthia Walsh, please identify yourself for the record.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. Just to correct something, I have the local special election final results, June 11th, 2024. The total voter turnout was 23%. Now, I was educated in the Stoughton school system. 23% isn't the majority of anything. That's the total vote. So that means 77% of the taxpayers, and by the way, you don't have to be a taxpayer to vote in the United States of America. You just have to be an American citizen, 18 or older. So a lot of people that can vote on this don't pay property taxes. That's their right. But 77% of the people that are eligible to vote in Stoughton stayed home. What folks, I think, are asking is, give us another chance to go after that 77% silent majority, because 77% is a majority, and see if we can change things. The fact that you can come back for a second or third or fourth bite of the apple is the American way. Just ask incoming President Trump. You can come to the well as many times as you want. To be president, you can only drink twice. So I think that most people who are fair-minded would say, let's see what the other 77% say. And if they don't show and we still get the same 23%, we get the same result, that's the American way, and we'll have to find another way. But I think that right now all folks are asking is one more chance. Even Karen Reed is getting another chance.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments from the public on Article 1? Please step forward, identify yourself for the record.
Hi, Elena Canis, Precinct 2. I wasn't going to speak because I know it's late and everyone wants to get out of here, but I felt compelled. I am a voter in this town, and I just want you to know that a certain group here does not speak for me. I'm in favor of the new school, and I hope that you'll also vote for that. I also want to say, similar to what another resident said about people treating people a certain way, you will have a member of this group who will, harass people constantly. She says terrible things about members of town meeting, members of various boards, in public, on public access television, but then we'll be the first one to say, like, why are people treating people like this? So we have to practice what we preach, okay? It's really important. And I saw members of this committee who also represented themselves here tonight as part of the Vote No committee. When you're here, you're a member of the Finance Committee. You're not a member of the Vote No committee. So I find that terribly unprofessional. And some of the things that I heard members of this committee say tonight was also unprofessional. And I just think that people should take a minute to think about the way that they're acting, who they represent, and what they're representing.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from the public on Article 1? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record, Mr. Anzavino.
That's only water, believe me. It looks very clear. Give me a break, I'm a senior. John Anzavino, 25 Ross Ave. And in a matter of transparency, yes, I was the chairman of the Independent Building School Working Group. I think we put a lot of time and effort into putting the report out. I'm looking forward to seeing the other report from whatever the other group was that said they'd have a full report coming out soon. But I just think if you look at what was out there, I think the facts were presented in there from what was available from the schools, the committee, the people that came in to talk to us. I won't address some of the comments I've seen online because I don't respond to them online, but when people want to say there was nobody on that committee from the No group, that's wrong. It's just misinformation, not unsurprising. We did have people that were not in favor of the school. And I will not say who they are because I don't know who on that committee in total was for or against. But I do know for a fact there were people that were not in favor of the school that served on that committee. So in the fairness of transparency, yes, I was on that committee. What I'd like to know is, has this committee, the members on this committee that are the chairman and the treasurer of the No group, ever publicly acknowledged that? Because I know there's no conflict of interest forms filed on it. I don't think I've ever heard them publicly state that they were on that committee, that PAC, as the chairman and the treasurer. So if you want to talk transparent and being upfront and everything else, you ought to consider doing that. That's all I have to say. I hope you people will vote in favor of this. I think the voters have every right to come back. We do it every year. for local offices. We do it every 4 years for presidential elections. We do it every 2 years for congressional. So what's the big deal? You're coming back to vote. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Point of order.
Thank you very much.
Point of
Do we
order.
have
I have a point of order. I'd like to just mention that when we deliberate here on the Finance Committee, we do not bring politics into this, and we should have rules set up. And I'd actually make a motion to say we should actually dissolve this meeting and reschedule it when we have rules that are set up where anybody who comes up to the mic, and I don't care which mic, whether it's in front of us or right behind the table, that we don't bring politics into the deliberations of the Finance Committee. That's not what we're doing. That's not what anybody had done. So we need to be careful about how we present ourselves in terms of politics versus deliberation on serious matters like projects of this magnitude. So I'd like to make a motion that we actually move this meeting to a future date, and so that we could actually have rules set up so that people who talk on the microphone don't bring
Dave,
politics in.
what politics are you talking about?
We have a second on this side of the table.
What politics are you talking about?
The
We have
fact
a public
that
hearing.
talking about like different committees that that are representing the yes and the no and all this, that's nonsense. It is not the case. We deliberate here based on the merits of an article, and that's the only conversation that should be brought up in front of any microphone here. There's too much politics. We already heard about all the acrimony that goes on in the town, and it started ever since we had to start over again with this whole process. So in this room, we don't bring politics into the deliberation. That's what I'm here to tell you. Now, we have a motion and a second, so now you have to dispose of this motion somehow.
The motion's not really in order. Do you have a comment, Carolyn?
I made a motion, and it was seconded.
I would say, first of all, the motion was as my point of order. That motion that you made, whether or not it was seconded, was not recognized by the chair. The chair did not call for a second, so therefore I would say it was not in order. Second, this is a public hearing at this point, and people can come, the public can come and make comments about whatever, and as long, we don't necessarily have to like them, but they do have the right to make them as long as they are in order. And finally, I understand that you have been complaining when people interrupt, though you were very quick to interrupt the chair to demand this point of order. So could we please just continue this public hearing, and then if we need a motion to close it so we can move on to deliberate on this article, it would be appreciated of our time.
We all know that you could interject with a point of order at any point that you want with Robert's rules. According to Robert's rules also, that if a motion is made and seconded, that the body has to dispose of that motion. That's on the table right now, and something should be done with it.
We can comment on it, yeah. Lauren?
I just want to get back to the school and how it affects the seniors. And I just wanted to let the seniors know and people that are having financial issues that we are looking into the different ways you can save money. And I'm on the Council on Aging board. I'm the co-chair there. And we just had a person come in and speak with all the different things that are available to the town, the residents here. And from what I understand, and Tom, you can correct me, but you're gonna have it so it's easily available and easy to do with people helping the seniors, so they're not all on their own. So I would just like to be a community and let's work at this. If we have to help the seniors, help the seniors. I would volunteer to help pay taxes for a senior, just like coats for kids and things like that, people that can't afford it. I don't understand all the anger here, and it's just really ridiculous. And I think we just need to get back to community and figure it out. That's all.
Thank you for that. Cynthia, did you have something on it?
I'm interrupting Mr. Chair, because like you, I chair a standing committee. And like you, we have a deadline. If this is delayed any further, the Finance Committee will not have a report for town meeting. My committee will, and the other two standing committees, well, the other one that's assigned this. But for the folks on the cheap seats, this is your last chance, this committee's last chance to have a decision, because time is short, and we're not delaying town meeting because you can't get your act together.
That sounds like, excuse me, but that sounds like an argument, but there's a motion on the floor.
Dave, can you please stop interrupting Cynthia?
There's still a motion on the floor.
Well, thank you for reminding me. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Oh, thank you very much, Chairman Cavey.
Yeah, I apologize for interrupting, but on this, I have some experience, as some people know. At the beginning of our public comments, there's often a statement that I read. I read that statement in order to make it clear what the parameters are. We are required to do that in order to protect ourselves against a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decision, which is Barron versus Calenda, also known as the Southborough case, sometimes informally known as the right to be rude law, which basically says that once a person has the microphone in a public hearing, their free speech rights, First Amendment rights, are fully preserved. They can talk about whatever they want, and they can say whatever they want on any subject. So you guys can make whatever decision you want, but putting any sort of guardrails on what people are allowed to say during a public hearing will probably be unconstitutional. You might want to consider that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to enlighten this committee and defend the Constitution and the First Amendment right.
So there's still a motion on the floor.
Okay, we get a motion on the floor. Do we have a second on the motion? Dave's got a motion to dissolve the meeting. Is that correct?
Until a future date, which would probably be 48 hours after you can actually get.
Which means we will not have a report for town meeting. So do we have a second?
We already have a second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we got 4 in favor, all opposed? Okay, we get 10 opposed. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from the public on Article 1, Elementary School Building Project? Please step forward and identify yourself for the record.
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. Moved here 35 years ago to the town of Stoughton. And one of the things that I liked about the town, number one, was the school system. And that's what you're talking about right now, is a school system. My son, my daughter, they went to the South School. My other son, he ended up going to junior high because of age. When we saw the South School, it was a very cute, quaint school. And if you think about it, that school was built because of the building boom that was going on back in the, I don't know when the school was built, 70s or whatever. 50s. Okay, thank you. They had to put up something real quick. If you look at some of the other schools, they were very well-constructed schools. That's why you don't need major construction on them. For the past 15, 20 years, no money, extensive money, has been spent on the South School. It's been Band-Aids and lipstick put on that. You talk about the teachers. I've heard people say the teachers could teach in a box. Well, I don't know about you, but over the years I've worked for different companies. And I really blossomed at the companies that I worked with that treated their employees well, number one. Number two, the buildings were kept impeccable. I worked at a couple of dumps as well, all right? I couldn't wait to get out of there at the end of the day. The only reason I stayed there was I needed to feed my family. So now you look at the teachers that are at the South School. They're working hard. They're doing the best they can with the tools they have. And you talk back and forth about the schools, the money that you can do it cheaper and all that. Well, how much are you really going to save? And I figured this out. I think the tax increase is somewhere around $350 per year that our taxes will go up. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm in the ballpark, a yes would be nice. Okay, so 350, right? Okay, give me a number. 300?
300 on a $500,000 house.
Okay, 300, all right? The point being, we'll keep it at 300. I was going to go 350. In 10 years, that's $3,000. I'm 70 years old. In 10 years, I probably will not be in my house for one reason or another. I'm going to be aged out of it, either by health, death, or my wife will think otherwise. So what happens is, well, she may want to go to Florida or something like that. But anyways, with that, I expect my house to gain more value than $3,000. If you keep kicking the can down the road, putting it off, you are going to lose people not coming into the town of Stoughton because they're going to look at what a dump the South School is. They're not doing anything for the students and for the town. So with this, I urge people to vote yes and support it well. One other comment, I want to applaud the building committee. Whether you like their design or not, the hours and hours that they have put in to pulling something together, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, the insults that they have been put towards them, they have had to put up with. And I can only imagine the number of phone calls that they have gotten while they're home having dinner. Somebody will be calling them, giving them a hard time or whatever. They probably lost a lot of sleep over this thing. And for that, I applaud them.
Well, thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments from the public? Article 1, Elementary School Building Project. Hearing none. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion to close the public hearing.
Diane's a second on that? Okay, motion and a second. All in favor of closing the public hearing? Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. Okay. We have a motion from the committee on Article 1, Elementary School Building Project.
I'd like to make a motion that the committee recommend approval of Article 1 as submitted.
Do we have a second on that? Who got the second? Heidi? Heidi. Okay, motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this from the committee? Dave.
This project does not belong in the town of Stoughton. It's just the wrong project. That's it. They had their chance to design the right school and they failed. We already kicked the can down the road going on 10 months. Nobody kicked the can down the road. Now it was already kicked. That's the problem that we have right now. So to hear that over and over and over again, kicking the can, it's just ridiculous because we are in the middle of the can halfway down the road. Okay, that's where we are right now. So I implore you to vote against this article so that they could get to work now on a project that should have happened on June 12th, which is a simple school to replace a bad school. Everybody who's come up and said all the reasons, the history of the school, everybody's in agreement that the school has to go away. Nobody's arguing otherwise. It needs to go away. It needs a new school. It needs to be replaced with a simple school, just like all the other schools in the town, because those are Stoughton-style schools. Those are neighborhood schools that the locals in that particular precinct enjoy taking their kids. They walk their kids to school. They don't get bused halfway across town. It's the wrong school. They had the chance to do it the right way. They knew the town couldn't afford it, but they did it anyway, and that's why they got the no vote, and they're about to get it again. Vote no now so that town meeting understands that they should get to work on a proper school that's new, will last 50 years, that's going to make people feel good about coming to work every day because it's a beautiful environment within a simple school design. They could have beautiful artwork put all over the classrooms with the great things that kids do in their classrooms with wonderful teachers. They don't need to have these pinwheels that are 3 stories tall in the middle of the woods. They just don't. Vote no. That's it. It's that simple.
All right. Lauren.
I just want to say that it's extremely disrespectful to mock the people that got up here and spoke. It's extremely rude, and you need to stop. That's my personal opinion.
All right, thank you for that. Any other discussion on the motion and the second? There, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Heidi.
I am voting for the new South School. I hear a lot of things around town about how, you know, oh, we're like Brockton, which that comment in and of itself is incredibly offensive to me, but that's the comment that I hear. And, you know, people talk about the crime rate and all these other things, and it's like, but they are not willing to take the opportunity to invest in this town and invest in our children. And this is what we have an opportunity to do right now. We have an opportunity to invest in our young people. We have a pile of money waiting for us. It's going to be cheaper for us to rebuild this school than it would be if we chose not to build this school at all. So I would implore you to vote yes.
All right, thank you for that. Lisa.
I think the people that want to keep shoving this over-designed, overpriced project down the taxpayers' throats are forgetting all the other capital projects that are in the pipeline, and that at some point, taxpayers are at capacity. Therefore, reasonable, practical designs need to be chosen at the outset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ian?
I think I just want to address the comment about a Rolls Royce and just kind of put things in perspective. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm guessing Rolls Royce probably something like 300,000. A family car is probably 30,000. So you're talking about a 10x difference. And I just want to highlight that the project on the table is not 10 times more than what all the other elementary schools are there. I think Mr. Feinberg pointed out that, you know, there are other towns building schools for $70 or $80 million and saying, well, why can't we spend a little bit less? You know, it may not necessarily be the absolute cheapest MSBA project, but there also are going to be towns that are paying a whole lot more. So I just want to put things in perspective. I am mindful that this is an expensive project. It's a lot of money for a lot of people, but I think it's a false equivalency to think that there is some radically cheaper alternative out there, because there really isn't.
All right, thank you very much. Carolyn.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to vote in favor, and I would like to urge everybody to show fiscal responsibility and vote in favor of this project. There has been no doubt, if anyone that's been involved in Stoughton politics for the last 25 years, that a new South School was coming. All right, that and perhaps that, the higher school and the new fire station on Prospect Street, all of those projects needed to happen as soon as 2000, and they did not for a variety of reasons. Money, nobody wanted a debt exclusion. Everybody said, we don't have the money, we don't want to increase taxes, so we pushed it down. We kicked the can down. The can has been kicked a lot longer than the last 10 months, as one of the previous speakers has mentioned. This is the fiscally responsible thing to do, because since 2010, when the Stoughton the town of Stoughton, both the select board and the school committee, started to submit statements of interest to the MSBA to build a new high school and the South School. Those have been approved by by both boards every time that a statement of interest is submitted. They have to go to the school committee, they have to go to the select board, everyone has to sign off of it just for the statement to get submitted to the MSBA. So this debate about building a South School has been going on currently since 2010. At some point, and it was decided, the MSBA recommended that we put the high school first because it was a larger project, and then the high school was in favor of was in danger of losing its accreditation, which would affect the entire school system. So the plan, they did the high school first, and when the high school was built and it was finished, everybody knew that the South School was coming. As part of that process, the school committee because the MSBA requires it, they require you to look at all the buildings that are within the school district and rate their, I don't know, fitness, I guess. It's not quite the right word, but the right word in construction terms is escaping me. And they're not going to let you, and they're going to, excuse me, you have to, they rate the buildings. They make you come up with a plan on when you're going to replace every building. So the first two on that list were the South School and the high school. The South School was in worse physical shape, but the high school affected more people and was in danger of accreditation. Everybody also knew that it was not possible to make major renovations to the South School without triggering the code requirements and the ADA because of the way, if you spend whatever the assessed value is, a certain percentage, I believe it's 30%, you, in a 3-year period on repairs, you have to bring those buildings up to code. And in the South School, it was known since 2000, bringing that building up to code would need a new school. So that was the other reason it was put off and not done in the 1990s. It was the only school that was not made fully ADA compliant, other than part of the high school, which was just not possible because there was no financial way to do so without building a new school because of the way the school is built and the layout and everything else. So we are now here. We completed the high school. We got approval for the South School. The next school on the list after the South School, if you went through the long-term capital building plan that the school department's done before the MSBA and updated, would be the West School, the Wilkins School, sorry. And so now what we have done here is we have combined 2 building projects for the price of 1. All right, after the Wilkins came the OMS. All right, and then there would have been the Jones and whatever else after that. So we are getting 2 building projects, 2 elementary school building projects for the price of 1 here. And I believe it would be fiscally irresponsible to spend more money on 2 smaller buildings and then keep more buildings in service. It is clear, it was not clear when the school committee made the presentation at town meeting in May, but it is clear now that the intent of the school committee in the town is if this project passed, the new school is built, the school committee is going to close the old South School and also close the Jones School. So they're going to turn 2 properties over to the town, over to the select board for disposition, and the select board has already indicated that they would like to recommend that the town sell those properties and take the money and apply them to the cost of the South School. All right, that is fiscally responsible. That wasn't an option in June, it is an option now. I think that is a significant that is a significant decision that we need to take into place, consideration. And if we want to make sure that's happened, that's where the role of us as, town meeting representatives and everything else will come into play to make sure that those promises are kept when that happens. All right? Because that's our role. But I think right now, if we vote against this project, We are being fiscally irresponsible. We are pushing this project down the road at least 3 to 4 years if we were going to do it without MSBA money. If we do not vote in favor of this project and we want MSBA money, we're looking at 5 years or more before we get admitted again. So at that point, the building's going to likely cost a lot more than it is now, and even if you built a smaller school then, it's still probably going to cost more than the larger school would cost now, and you would have the additional cost of also replacing the Wilkins School. Thank you.
Just have a point of information real quick. I just, to the previous speaker, there's just a small detail that I just want to bring attention to, is that the next elementary school is true. The West School, Wilkins, would be the next elementary school. The next school in line is the OMS before they would have to touch the West or Wilkins, because in the facilities master plan that was published in, I believe, spring of 2023, it was graded a D, the middle school. The Wilkins was graded a C. They had like an A, B, C, D grading system, and that's the order. But I think you're correct if you're talking about elementary schools in line, but not all schools.
Well, thank you very much for the clarification, Dave. Any other discussion on this? Jonna?
I'll make this short and sweet. The people have voted, and you're not accepting the will of the people. And the only other comment is that someone said that most of the people didn't vote. This is the largest turnout we've had either ever or almost. And sometimes you don't get the vote you want, but that's the way it goes, and you're not respecting the people, and it's really insulting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other discussion on this? No more discussion. All right, well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay. All opposed? Okay, so we got 5 opposed, so we get 9 to 5 then. All right, you want to double count that?
So that would be 9 to 5, 9 yes, 5 no.
Yeah, you want to redo the count? Yeah.
No, it's not, it's
Yeah.
14.
Thank you, though. Yeah, okay.
Did I count that right?
Yeah.
Vaughn,
Yes.
after you do all the paperwork, all I wanted to say was,
Yes.
the last time this vote came up to the townspeople, the good people of Stoughton, the wording on that was so obscure that it would be nice if we could put on that ballot something in plain, ordinary English so people could look at it and say yes or no.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Elliot. So the motion passes 9 to 5. And
Excuse me, I'd like to just add, there's also been a tradition that a report from the Finance Committee gets put in the warrant. I'd like to make it possible for that that it did pass by Finance Committee, but that the no votes voted no, and why. They're going to, there's going to be people at town meeting who say, what happened? Why did they vote no? They always do that.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to rebut that and say, why can't we have the people that wrote yes, put why they voted yes?
Sure.
We can do that if we want.
That as well.
I would like to say generally the people that voted either yes or no, and I know both, several of us, including myself, will likely be speaking at town meeting anyway, sharing our views, so I don't really think we need to worry what is in the report. I suspect, Dave, everybody knows what you're going to say, and everybody probably knows what I'm going to say, and they could probably say it for us at this point.
We also don't know who's going to make it on February 3rd because it's in the middle of winter. People are on vacation and whatnot. So not everybody who had a concern about this one way or the other.
Do you have a sentence, Dave, that you're referring to? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that because...
Carolyn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
No, we're in the middle. Excuse me, but that's, I have the floor, and all of a sudden I'm being stepped on with a motion to adjourn.
Did we have a second on that?
I had the floor. What happens?
You did that.
I'm a vice chair of the committee, and you're going to step on my conversation about what I want to put as a report?
Do you have a second?
That was the question that was put to me.
On the motion.
But that's,
Do we have
yes.
I have a motion, I made a motion to adjourn. I believe if you,
Diane, you're the second.
Mr. Chairman, please take control of the meeting.
Yes.
Use your gavel. People should not be stepping over other people that are trying to speak.
Dave, do you have a simple sentence?
Thank you, because that was the question you gave me
And I've
before
asked you
got
several
stepped.
times, and you have not answered.
I got Vaughn.
Do you have a
Vaughn,
simple
please.
sentence?
do you want to put something in the, to summarize, you want to put something in the report that says why the no voted people?
Dave, do you have a simple
do,
sentence?
But I can't start talking before I get interrupted.
Say the sentence.
Please, that the people who voted no was because that the project was too expensive and it required the students to leave a neighborhood in the West, that they have to all of a sudden be redistricted away from their neighborhood school. Those are two key reasons.
So your sentence is, people voted no because the project is or was. You said was. I want to be grammatically correct.
The project is too expensive.
Is too expensive and requires students to
lose a neighborhood school in the West.
Students to lose a neighborhood school.
They lose a neighborhood school, don't they? The kids in the West, they lose a
School
neighborhood
in the West.
Yeah.
So Dave, your sentence is, people voted no because the project is too expensive and requires students to lose a neighborhood school in the West.
Correct.
Okay. Do you want to check the other people who voted no on this? You
There's
all right
more
about that?
reasons about funding, but we're not going to have time for that because you gave me one sentence.
People who voted no on that, are you good with that sentence? Are you good with that, Chet? Arnie, you good with that? John, are you good with that? Lisa, you good with that? Those are the 5 people who voted no. Dave, you good with that? So, voted no because project is too expensive and requires students to lose a neighborhood school in the West. There we go. Is the sentence. We're good? Okay, thank you.
Now, may I make
Yes,
a
you
motion to
absolutely.
adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Diane's a second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you at town meeting.